The first quality of attention, the first of the three qualities, attention, balance, and compassion, is attention or awareness. And some of these practices are something we would call concentration practices. They're usually the starting point for mindfulness and meditation, regardless of the age, because they're developmentally appropriate at absolutely every level. And they help people manage anxiety. They help people manage rumination, and they help people develop a greater capacity for self-regulation and for restraint. So under this general umbrella of attention or awareness come the two life skills, quieting and focusing. Sometimes kids and parents and caregivers, they need help tolerating levels of stress and strong feelings that can feel intolerable, and they want that help fast. So mindfulness-based quieting tools, which require some focused attention, provide surprisingly quick short-term relief from overwhelming emotions. So the basic principle on how we use mindfulness-based strategies to downregulate our nervous system and to calm is that we move our attention away from what's bothering us to a neutral, a pleasant, or to a neutral or a pleasant present moment experience. And of course, to do that, you need strong attention or some attention at least, and that's why the quieting strategies are paired with focusing. So it's important to understand the relationship between mindfulness, stress, and the nervous system. If you're looking for secular mindfulness for calming strategies, for stress reduction, for largely therapeutic reasons, it's really key that you have a real general, at least a general basic understanding of how our nervous systems work and how kids' nervous systems work. So we talk to kids about their nervous system, and we talk about the system as being a little like an inner watchdog. It's an ancient survival mechanism that's in place to keep us safe. So that inner watchdog of ours, our nervous system, its job is to keep an eye out for danger. And when it senses danger, it protects us by activating the sympathetic nervous system, the SNS for short. Sorry, that's a lot of S's right there. The SNS for short. And shifting into a reactive mode called fight, flight, or freeze. So fight, flight, or freeze is a survival mechanism that we're born with. It gives us the energy to respond skillfully when we are in danger. How? By releasing hormones like adrenaline that make our hearts beat faster and that increase the speed of our breathing and the blood flow to our muscles. When all that energy is directed toward survival, that doesn't leave as much energy for our critical thinking capacities. And so when our energy is focused on fighting or fleeing or freezing, we don't have as much energy as we usually do to think, to listen, to learn, and to be open to new ideas. So all stress is not the same. The fight, flight, or freeze reaction response, it's a life-saving reaction to physical danger, like a fire or a car crash or a tiger chasing us in the jungle. But sometimes everyday stress leads us to respond as if we are in physical danger when we really aren't. This becomes a problem when our stress response is continually triggered by things like getting good grades at school, or wanting to be liked on social media, or fighting with or navigating problems with our siblings or our parents. So when the stress response gets activated by worrisome thoughts like, I'm going to fail, I'm not good enough, I don't have any friends, when that happens, we can end up creating an environment where it feels like we're actually in danger, but we're not. And when our stress response gets triggered for too long or too often by pressures like these, we can feel mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted. So there's a law called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And the Yerkes-Dodson law is this idea of finding the just right level of stress. I think of it a little bit like Goldilocks in the Three Bears. What is just the right amount of level of stress, the amount that gives you enough activation that you're alert, that healthy amount of stress, but not so much that you tip over into fight, flight, or freeze. So one of the things, this image that's up, I really, really like this slide of that law, the Yerkes-Dodson law, because it shows you that when you're at the top of the slide, the guy in the yellow shirt, that's when you're your best. You're alert, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. You've got just enough pressure to have your brain light up and be interested and engaged, but not so much that you're going to tip over one side or other side of this curve. One side of the curve, the guy in the red shirt, is one that we're all familiar with. It's when people go into fight or flight. People can be reactive, people can be angry, people can be loud. It's really easy to identify. The other side of the curve, though, is one that often gets missed in our work with kids and teenagers. And that's when people withdraw. They go more into the freeze mode. They pull back. When our kids spend a lot of time in their room, when they spend a lot of time by themselves, kind of closed down, it's easy not to see that as a response to just a little bit too much stress. So what we're looking for is that just right level of stress, enough to make us alert, active, engaged, but not so much that it tips us over into fight, flight, or freeze, or in fight or flight, or in the other direction to freeze. So some people think of the stress response system as a light switch. It's an on or off switch, but that's really not the case. It's more like a dimmer switch that makes the light brighter or softer. And that's how we find that just right level of pressure. Sometimes kids don't relate so well to the idea of a light dimmer switch. They relate more to the idea of a sound fader, where you fade the sound up or down until you find just the right volume that works for you. So as I've been talking about, some stress or pressure is healthy. Too little pressure, we're not motivated to do anything. Too much pressure, and we close down, we feel stressed, we feel anxious. We do our best when we have that just right level of pressure. Mindfulness is very, very helpful here, because mindfulness helps us notice when we're under pressure and where that dimmer switch, that fader is set, if it's too bright or if it's too dim. If it's too low, if it's too dim, mindfulness can help us dial it up with specific mindfulness-based practices that make us more alert and more energized. If it's too bright, mindfulness can help us dial it back with specific practices that help down-regulate our system and ground us more. Balance is the key to this process. And mindful strategies help you find that balance, that just right level of pressure, so you can do things you need to do without feeling exhausted or overwhelmed. So I was telling you how mindfulness is like an inner watchdog, and that it can help us find balance by knowing where that dimmer switch is set and whether it's too high or too low. And that's really the difference between a mindful watchdog, one that can discern, can help you understand where your dimmer switch is set, and just the plain old nervous system watchdog, which is going to react in a fight, flight, or freeze mode, depending on the input that it receives. So that's why the development of mindfulness is so helpful, is it adds a level of discernment to this function of our nervous system that is happening already. So our mental response to stress really changes depending how our bodies feel. So there's a connection between stress and tension, and that's what I want to talk about next. When we're stressed, our minds and our bodies constrict and they get very tight. So when that dimmer switch is set high, our minds tend to get tighter, and so do our bodies. And when we tense up, it's harder to listen, it's harder to learn, it's harder to be open to new ideas. So we've talked about how when our SNS is activated, our body releases adrenaline and our heart rate and our breathing speed up. Those are reasons that our minds and our bodies tense up. It's no wonder because we are pushing for survival. So, to manage stress when we are not in a situation that is life threatening, it's very helpful to notice the sensation of stress in your body, to notice that you're feeling stress, your shoulders, your back, your neck, and then bring gentle awareness to those areas and see if you can soften and relax. And when your body softens and relaxes, your mind tends to relax and open and broaden too. So that's one of the mindfulness-based strategies that we use is we notice the tension in our body. And when our body is tense because of stress, we respond through relaxation. And then we are often pleasantly surprised that our mind then responds too. So when we relax our bodies, our minds tend to open. When we are stressed, our minds tend to get tense. So you see these two pictures here. You can see the guy in the green chair. His whole body is tensed up, and you can tell that his mental bandwidth is limited. And that's because he's feeling under pressure and stress. But when you relax, you can see the guy in the orange chair. He is feeling more open. He's feeling more relaxed in both his body and his mind. And that's why we teach kids that minds change bodies and bodies change minds. And this is another one of these key points that I hope that you take home with you from this presentation, is that mindfulness is not all about working with our minds, although that's certainly part of it, but it's awareness of our minds and our bodies in the world around us and seeing the relationship between all of it. And especially in connection with minds and bodies, we see that if we're not very successful in helping our minds get more open, that we can shift our attention to our bodies and relax tension, and the body change will change the mind. And similarly, if we're finding that our bodies are feeling tight and we are having a hard time relaxing, that if we shift our attention to our mind and relax our minds, that our bodies will also respond by relaxing. So minds change bodies and bodies change minds. One way that we teach kids about how minds change bodies and bodies change minds is by using a snow globe. Remember I was telling you about mindfulness-based strategies where we move our attention away from what we're thinking about to a present moment sensation that is neutral or pleasant. And the snow globe is a great way to show kids how that works. So you see, if you look through this globe, you can see I feel still and I feel centered and I feel grounded right now. And you can see through the clear globe to the other side, right? That's how we feel when we are grounded. We're able to see to the other side, but sometimes we get under stress or we've got a lot of worries or concerns, and that's like the snow in the snow globe. And look, I can't see through to the other side anymore. With mindfulness, we stop thinking about what we're worried about and we move our attention instead to perhaps the feeling of the breath or just watching the snow settle. And when we do that, look what happens. Everything settles down at the bottom, and soon we can see through the globe again. See? But when we get upset or nervous, look what can happen. It can be tough to see clearly. So what do? Again, we move our attention away from worrying about our thoughts or worrying about our stress into a present moment experience, like feeling the movement of breath or watching the snow. And sure enough, we can see clearly again. So this glitter ball really is a great way to show kids what happens when our minds get busy and how then it's tough to see clearly, and what happens when we ground ourselves by moving our attention to something other than what we're thinking about, and how that helps settle the glitter. This is also, if you're a parent, an amazing, it's almost a magical practice, I've got to tell you. If you put something like this on your kitchen counter, and at some point you're feeling like you're not seeing clearly, you're feeling overwhelmed, then you can just pick it up and say, hey, to your children, look, at mommy's mind feels like this right now. So can you just hang out with me for a second and just feel your breathing with me, or watch the snow settle with me, and see if we can mommy can settle her mind and settle her body so that I can see more clearly. And when we model that for our kids, when we're feeling out of sorts, that is really the most powerful mindfulness practice of all.